Hey guys, I'm Brad of Brave the Woods, and today I'm going to share with you 5 simple drawing tips to help you improve your accuracy, your speed, and ultimately how you see. But drawing is so much more than just the marks and lines that you're making. It's really about training your eyes to see. See things like scale, lighting, shapes, all different types of things within your reference image. And I'm saying reference image because yes, I still use reference images even though I've drawn 1,000 bears or 1,000 trees. It still helps me. And if you're learning and you want to get better at drawing, it's really important that you learn how to draw from a subject, draw from life, and be able to see things first. And then you can go off and exaggerate and be infinitely creative. Now there's some of you unicorns out there that don't need reference images ever. That's not me. So if this is for you, I want to help you just learn how to see things and then ultimately draw better. So here's 5 quick tips. Follow along and it'll be a lot of fun. Tip number 1, let's start with shapes. We're going to look at our object that we want to draw and find the major basic shapes that make up the main mass of that object. And then we'll go from there. So I'm going to use a bison as an example, mainly because I like to draw bison, but also it has lots of really cool shapes in it, so it makes sense. I just knocked back the opacity a little bit just to show you how you might be able to see the shapes. And I would separate them by head, body, legs. If it's a tree, the trunk, those are separate. Try to separate them because later it'll make more sense when we're talking about scale and size relationships. But for the example, like you might see this as just a rectangle. Maybe it's just a straight up rectangle and this is more of like a box. That's fine. You can look at it like that. It's really just to kind of get the main mass mapped out. I would see it a little bit differently, but let me show you. I'm not going to trace over it for this. I'm going to use this as my reference image. So I'm going to put him up in the corner. This guy from just looking at him and just seeing at the major shapes. So again, like I see these, I kind of see it tilting up more because it's got this big hump that's pronounced. So I'm going to kind of see it as this. I'm going to pull this back. Maybe this is too many lines. Sometimes if you feel like you're getting too many lines, it probably just means you are. You are doing too many lines and you don't need to worry about that right yet. So it kind of slopes up. So that's kind of the main mass that I'm seeing for his body. For his head, kind of looking where this starts. You know, it looks like it's about here. That's kind of what I see. Now see, that's already looking like the size relationship's off, but that's okay. We're really just trying to get the main mass, and we'll deal with sizing later. But then I can kind of look at it and say, okay, maybe that's where his arm is, and his legs kind of go back. Again, we don't have to sort all this out right now. We're just trying to get the main mass. So there we go. I feel like that's pretty decent, but what this is doing is helping us just see, kind of build the framework of where this is going to be. We're just kind of mapping out like if this was a building plans, this is like the footing. This is just the ground, and we're trying to see what the square space is and see where we're going to build. So this is where we're going to build and what we're going to build on top of, but it's important that you see the shape first. Tip number 2, look for relationships. Those are relationships in location and scale, all those fun things. When you're looking at your reference image, try to pick out things that can kind of give you hints to where things are supposed to be. For example, let's say his head, where his head starts up here compared to where it drops back for his legs. There's a significant gap. So his body is, these front legs aren't just right up here. They're pretty far back. So I want to make sure that matches on my drawing. So I want to make sure that when I kind of see this, that angle. Look at the angle, try to see it. That's going to roll back a little bit. So maybe that goes back. I want to maybe see how big the body should be compared to the head. So if I look back at my reference image, I can circle that guy. And maybe I just repeat that same circle over and over again to see really how big that is. Now it's rough, obviously. So it's about 3 head lengths to make up that body. So I'm going to look at the scale of what I got going on and copy that same thing over here. Whoops. And I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close. This seems to be pretty similar. So I'm pretty good there. Maybe I'm looking for this gap right here. Where else, I'm looking at this gap. That line's kind of longer. So either this needs to go back or this leg needs to come forward a little bit to kind of match up with that. Meaning this whole part kind of has to move forward. But I kind of look around, I kind of pick apart what it is. I look from like this gap right here, the belly to the ground. Do I have that big of a gap? No. So I probably need to bring his stomach up just a little bit. And then I'll erase this guy right here. Now it seems kind of messy. This is kind of, I do a lot of this in my head now that I illustrate, but if you're looking at it, it's important just to see these relationships and try to map it out just a little bit. You don't need to go in and start rounding off edges and doing things. You really just need to see the relationship of size and where things are located on this object of yours, just to make sure that you have the bones right. And then we'll move on to a more fleshed out version. Tip number 3 is to start loose. Now, clearly we've already been loosey-goosey with our bison drawing, but I want you to go now from after doing the shapes, checking the proportions, the scale, the sizes, all that fun stuff, getting the main bones here. Now we want to kind of shape it a little bit. But what I'm saying is be loose and be quick. You don't really need to spend a whole lot of time on this next step. Now, if you're doing this on pen and paper, great, get a piece of tracing paper and draw right over top of this. Or if you drew in a light enough blue or whatever, or a light enough sketch, just draw straight over top of it. But the next step is really just defining some of those shapes. Now, this is looking like you could probably say, yeah, it's probably going to be a bison. It's not a bison yet. So we'll want to do some things now to kind of finesse the shape, to kind of define that body a little bit. And again, I'm working really fast. I don't really care too much about the accuracy of all these little details. That's fine. Like I might be exaggerating things a little bit much. That's okay. I'll work up here with the head. I can start to round those off now. The things that I didn't want to touch when I was just figuring out volume and size, now I can jump into those. And maybe there's a little bit of a nose there. It feels like his little beard comes back a little further. Kind of give him his chest right there. Man, their heads go way far out from their legs. Looking at this now. Okay, so in a main body, you can even start drawing in kind of where you think that shoulder is going to be. That wouldn't hurt at this point. And then kind of go like this. That kind of goes up. I'm trying to see. Now I'm still looking. Now I'm keeping in mind the things that I've learned before, which was relationships and scale and all this stuff. Those other previous steps, keep those in your mind and keep working on those. If you need to draw new shapes, draw new shapes. Or if you need to kind of draw a line and kind of see, okay, this doesn't line up with that knee. It lines up right back here. So I'm going to do the same thing. It doesn't line up right against that. So I'm going to try to get that little shape right there. I'm going to erase it. The little shape there to kind of link up. Is that a haunch? Yeah, it's a haunch. His little tail. What is his tail doing? I feel like if I saw a cow doing that, I know exactly what the cow is doing. And I don't want to be drawing it. But I'm not sure if maybe that's not what it means for buffalo. But all right, okay, here we go. So let's take out that next layer, or the layer underneath it. And this is starting to look more like a bison. Now he seems to be leaning forward a little bit. Well, that was a terrible arrow. He leans forward a little bit. So maybe when I go back, I'm doing too much now, but I'm gonna kind of go back and finesse that. But what we did, we're starting loose. We're trying to define the shapes and now the edges a little bit better. And now I'm on to the next step. Tip number 4 is to repeat, repeat, repeat. Go ahead and take the first 3 tips and continue to apply them as you're moving forward with your sketch. And we're gonna build off of that sketch and continue doing iteration after iteration so that this is cleaned up. If you're using tracing paper, that's perfect. Just drop another piece of tracing paper on top and continue working. So I'm gonna get my little reference image out here. I'm gonna knock this back because I can already see things I wanna change. Clearly it's still in the sketching mode. And we're going to start refining this a whole lot more. And it's a whole lot easier now because we've already built it up this far. Okay, so some things that I want to take care of before I start finessing this is to make sure this is 100% what I want. I'm noticing here that on his underbelly, it kind of does this little arc thing, and I don't really have that here. It just kind of goes flat. So I'm going to try and mimic that a little bit. Out there, so his stomach isn't so chunky. He's not, I mean, he's pretty built, but that seems to be a little excessive. So bring that eraser size down. And then when I have that, I can start, you know, being a little bit more purposeful with the lines that I'm dropping, knowing that I'm getting closer to the final. But it's a whole lot easier now that I have this main shape than it was before, because I was still, if I just did this, like again, if I just did this freehand, I started drawing the contour lines without having a basic shape, it's going to be all sorts of hard, and you're not going to have all sorts of relationship issues over here with the sizes. So having that down is really, really helpful. So I have that. Maybe that went up too high. I think that's the problem. So I went up a little high. Okay, now it's starting to feel like a bison. We can kind of do that. Okay, now, again, so it's an iterative process, so we continue to do it. So now he's looking a lot more accurate. And then we're going to add, you know, another layer, go down, and we'll just keep building onto this and making sure now I can kind of go on here and I can add a little bit more, a little hair maybe. Really finesse this into something that you like all of your lines. You're very purposeful in how you're dropping your lines, and you like them. They feel right, so stick with them. And then you just keep repeating until it's something awesome, and then we'll talk about some details here in just a second. Finally, tip number 5 is to step back. You'll get really focused on one portion and a lot of these details, and you start getting closer and closer, but that means you're not paying attention to everything else. Now, granted, you can probably feel a little bit better about it since we've done all the legwork of making sure the skeleton of this thing is correct and we built it off of that. But still, there's some things that you just can't see when you're super hyper close. For example, maybe it's the shading here. Maybe, you know, the lighting, it's just a little too white up at the top there. So I could come back, let's make sure I'm on here. I could come back in here, and I wouldn't have seen that if I was still staying up close, and really darken this portion right here. Make that feel a little bit, see this part right here. There we go. Now you can kind of see this part pop out by just adding a little bit more of that, the shading there. Maybe this is a little bit darker. Maybe this back part's a little bit, who knows? But there's just some of, maybe at the top it needs to be, there we go. A little bit of that. But these are some of the things that you just wouldn't have seen if I was sitting there hyper focused on his face. I start losing track of what it's going to look like as a whole. So take a step back. If it's analog, go put this on a wall and walk away, or just step up and look at it from a slight distance. It helps. I do the same thing for just here. I'll just shrink it down and try to see how everything's coming together. And it's just one important step that a lot of us overlook, or a lot of us skip, and then you pull back and you've wasted a whole lot of time doing this really crazy detail work when the eye's in the wrong spot or whatever. So pull back. So those are my 5 drawing tips. I hope this video was helpful and I hope you enjoyed watching it. Just remember that this is all about mileage. You're training your eyes to see those relationships and to see what's going on in front of you, and then you can be able to output that on your paper or your tablet. But the practice, you cannot ignore that. These are great tips and you will see improvement right away. I promise you that. But if you really want to become better at drawing, you will put in the time and look at things around you. Take anything you want, drop it in front of you and start drawing it. That's why we do when you're in art school and things, you're doing a whole lot of still lifes because you're just learning to see. So take that and run with it. I'm grateful for you guys for watching this. If you guys are new, please subscribe. We do this every single week. And for those of you around, you guys are awesome. Thanks so much. Please drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.